My name is Logan Brooks. I'm 36 years old, and I hold the rank of captain in the United States Army. I've served 3 tours overseas, lost friends I considered brothers, and seen enough of the world to know how fragile everything really is. You don't get to my age, in this line of work, without picking up a few ghosts along the way. Most of us keep those ghosts locked up tight. We bury them beneath medals, under missions, behind that blank stare people mistake for strength. But lately, I've been carrying one that's gotten too heavy to hide. Not from others, from myself. This story isn't about combat. It's not about bravery, or strategy, or some battlefield glory. This story is personal. It's about family. It's about what happens when everything you thought was real starts to unravel, one silent thread at a time. It's about looking in the mirror and asking, who am I, really? For most of my life, I thought I had the answers. I grew up in a military household. My father was a colonel before he retired, the kind of man who saluted even when no one was looking. My mother passed when I was little, and after that, it was just me, my dad, and Roland. Roland was my brother. At least that's what we always believed. We were born 2 weeks apart, raised like twins, inseparable through childhood and high school. We both enlisted. We trained together, deployed together, bled together. We called each other brother in every way that mattered. And for a long time, that was enough. But something happened after our father passed. Something I didn't expect. It started with a will, just a piece of paper, but it tore open a part of me I didn't even know existed. Since then, I've uncovered things I can't unlearn. Truths that shook the foundation of who I thought I was and who I thought he was. That's why I'm telling this now. Because for years, I've lived under the weight of a story that wasn't mine to begin with. But the truth deserves a voice. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear it as much as I need to say it. Growing up in a military home meant everything had a rhythm. Wake at dawn, make your bed tight enough to bounce a coin, speak only when spoken to, and always call your father sir even when he was tucking you in. That was the foundation for both of us. And Roland and I, we weren't born on the same day, but no one ever questioned it. My dad brought Roland home from the hospital just 2 weeks after I was born. He said the nurses joked about how he was back shopping for sons like groceries. To us, it felt like fate. We shared a crib, learned to walk by chasing each other down the hallway, and spoke our first words the same week. Roland was softer than me. He cried more when we were little, clung harder to Dad's legs when the thunder rolled in. I was the one who climbed the trees, scraped my knees, and jumped into the lake without thinking. But when I got hurt, it was Roland who sat by me with a wet towel and a worried face, whispering it was going to be okay. As we got older, those differences showed up everywhere. I loved structure, routine, order. Roland liked to drift, change plans, chase sparks. I got straight A's and led drills. He barely passed algebra, but somehow convinced the lunch lady to give him extra dessert every day. Still, we were inseparable. It didn't matter who did better in school or who got in trouble more often. At the end of the day, we were brothers. By the time we hit 16, we both knew what came next. The military was in our blood. Not just because of our father, but because we craved the same things: honor, belonging, a purpose bigger than ourselves. We applied to West Point together. I got in first, but I held off until Roland got his letter too. We stepped onto that campus side by side. Training brought out the best and worst in us. I thrived under pressure. Roland buckled, then bounced back, then fell again. There were moments I wanted to throttle him for being careless. But there were also nights I caught him quietly cleaning my boots because mine were always worse than his. He had this way of making up for things without ever saying sorry. Deployment sealed the bond. We were stationed in Kandahar on our first tour, then Fallujah. We watched men die. We carried each other through sandstorms, firefights, and weeks without sleep. One night, when a convoy was hit, I dragged Roland out of a burning Humvee. He never thanked me. He didn't need to. After that, our relationship changed in a subtle way. We didn't talk about fear. We didn't talk about love. We just existed, side by side, like gravity held us together. When we came home, we bought houses 3 blocks apart. Every Sunday, we had beers and watched football like nothing ever happened. People said we were lucky. Most siblings drift apart. That war breaks bonds more than it builds them. But not us. If anything, it made us tighter. We never called each other stepbrother, adopted, or anything like that. We just said brother. And for a long time, I believed that word was enough. It was more than enough, until it wasn't. The funeral was quiet, military, and sharp around the edges. Taps played like a memory folding into itself. I stood there in full uniform, watching them lower the flag, my hand on my heart, my thoughts somewhere else. It wasn't until 3 weeks later that the lawyer called. I remember sitting in that leather chair in his office, stiff from formality, wondering what a lifetime of loyalty and duty would add up to on paper. I didn't expect anything flashy. My father wasn't flashy. He was structured, calculated, exacting. What I didn't expect was to open the will and see Roland's name printed again and again. Properties, trust funds, investments, even the ranch in Montana, all of it went to him. My name came at the end. A short sentence. Logan Brooks is to receive his father's timepiece. That was it. A weathered wristwatch and a thank you. At first, I laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. I thought maybe there had been a mistake, a page missing, a draft that had gone unsigned. But the lawyer looked at me like he'd seen this kind of pain before. Cold, sharp, unspoken. I walked out with the watch in a velvet box and nothing else. I didn't open it for days. I couldn't. My hands would shake every time I reached for it. It wasn't about the money, it was about what it meant. Or what it didn't. Roland didn't even call. No gloating, no explanation, just silence. I started running through every memory, every moment, trying to figure out when the shift happened. When my father stopped seeing me as his son, or worse, when he decided I wasn't worthy of more. Then I found the letter. Tucked inside the back panel of his desk drawer, it was handwritten, the ink faded, folded in half 3 times. The envelope wasn't sealed. My name was scrawled on the front, no rank, no title, just Logan. The letter was long, but there's one sentence I'll never forget. I loved you more than I knew how to say, but I carried guilt I never knew how to bury. My father explained that years ago, he discovered Roland wasn't his biological son. A clerical error, a mix-up in a hospital on a base overseas. He and my mother found out, and after she died, he chose to keep it secret, chose to raise Roland anyway, chose to carry that weight alone. He said he tried to love Roland the same, but never could, and that the guilt of that failure haunted him. The will, he wrote, wasn't about fairness, it was about balance. A way to give Roland something he could never give emotionally. A way to leave behind peace, even if it costs clarity. And me? He said he knew I didn't need the money, that I had always stood tall without a crutch, that I had my own legacy to build, that the watch had been with him every day in combat, through fire and frost, and it belonged to the one he trusted to carry it forward. I read that letter a dozen times before I believed it. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream. But all I could feel was tired. Tired from carrying a love I never had to question, and now realizing it had been twisted into something I didn't recognize. Still, I kept the letter. I kept the watch. And for the first time, I started to wonder what else I didn't know. The injury wasn't life-threatening, but it was enough to ground me. A roadside blast outside Mosul left me with a fractured rib and a damaged vertebra. During recovery, the doctors ran routine panels and blood work, prepping for a possible marrow donation to another wounded soldier in my unit. One test came back flagged. There was an anomaly in my genetic markers. The medical team asked if I had any siblings. I told them, yes, a brother, same age, raised together. They ran Roland's info for compatibility, but the system kicked it back. No match. Not even close. I didn't say anything at first. Chalked it up to hospital error, wrong data, something technical, but the thought wouldn't let go. It sat in my chest like a knot pulling tighter every hour. I started asking quiet questions, tracing back timelines in my head, watching old home videos for clues I didn't want to find. That's when I remembered the watch. My father's watch? He never went anywhere without it. After he passed, I noticed a few strands of hair stuck between the leather band and the backing. I never touched them, never thought I'd need to. Until now. I took the hair to a private lab under a different name, told them I needed a full paternal analysis. I waited 2 weeks. The day the results arrived, I opened the file while sitting in my truck, parked behind the gym where Roland and I used to train. My hands were sweating, my vision tunneled. The report was short. Logan Brooks, 99.98% paternity match. Roland Carter, 0%. I stared at the numbers until they stopped meaning anything. My throat closed. My ears rang. I sat there for what felt like hours, the world outside still moving while mine froze in place. I always knew we looked different. People had pointed it out. He was stockier, lighter-haired, and more mild-mannered. But I'd spent a lifetime ignoring those comments, brushing them off like dust. Because blood never mattered to me. Until it did. Suddenly, everything about the will made sense. Or maybe it made less sense. Roland wasn't my father's son. I was. The one who carried his DNA, his discipline, his pride. And yet, I was the one written out. Left with a watch while the stranger walked away with an empire. I started thinking about every mission we survived together. Every beer is shared on quiet Sunday afternoons. Every birthday. Every wound. And I realized I didn't know who I was angry at. Roland? My father? Or myself? For needing it all to mean something more than it did? I felt sick, betrayed by the people I trusted most. My identity, so tightly woven into theirs, had frayed without me even noticing. I wasn't just grieving my father anymore. I was grieving a whole history that suddenly felt artificial, manufactured, fragile. And yet, beneath the anger, beneath the shame, was something colder. Emptiness, like a room stripped bare after the furniture's gone. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, and for the first time, I wondered if I ever really had a brother. I hadn't set foot in my parents' house since the funeral. Everything still smelled like his cologne and old leather. The air was thick with silence, like the walls were waiting for someone to speak first. I walked past the old hallway photos and ended up in his study, drawn there like a reflex. The safe was hidden behind the bookcase, same place it had always been. He used to keep important documents there, a few firearms, and a sealed envelope marked with my name. That envelope was gone now, but in its place, I found something else. Tucked in a metal box beneath the pistol rack was a bundle of letters, bound with a rubber band that had long since cracked. The paper was yellowed at the edges, his handwriting instantly familiar. I sat at his desk, the same one he wrote orders from, and opened the top letter with hands I couldn't keep still. He didn't start with "Dear Logan," he started with "I'm sorry," over and over, in ways that felt more like confession than apology. The truth unraveled in careful lines. When I was born, there had been a mistake. 2 babies were born hours apart in a military hospital. The staff swapped us without realizing it. By the time the error came to light, weeks had passed. My parents could have fought it, could have demanded that the biological child be returned, but they didn't. My mother was already attached to both of us, and my father, out of loyalty to her and to his own code, chose to raise the boy handed to them. That boy was Roland. He wrote that the guilt came early and never left, that every time he looked at Roland, he saw a child who didn't belong to him but never asked to be born into that mix-up. He tried to love him the same, but admitted he always felt a wall between them. A wall built from truth no one dared speak aloud. That silence became a burden. It ate away at him. In the letters, he said he loved me not because I was his blood, but because I reminded him of everything he believed a son should be. And that scared him. Because the love came easily for me, but for Roland, it was a choice he had to keep forcing. The money, he wrote, wasn't about inheritance. It was penance. An attempt to leave Roland something real, something that might stand in for the fatherly warmth he never truly received. He hoped the wealth would give Roland safety. Not validation, but stability. And he hoped I would understand, that I would rise above the pain, like I always had. I finished the last letter with tears that I didn't feel fall. For the first time, I saw my father as more than a soldier. I saw a man trapped by duty, love, and shame, trying to do right in a situation no one could have predicted. He wasn't cold, he was broken. I pressed my palm against the old oak desk, felt the grooves where his pen had dug deep during long nights. He had carried this secret alone for decades. Now, it belonged to me. I didn't leave the study for hours, just sat there, surrounded by silence and paper ghosts, wondering how many other truths in life are buried under good intentions and locked drawers. And for the first time since the will, I didn't feel angry, I felt human. I didn't contest the will. I thought about it, spent nights staring at blank pages, trying to write the opening line to a lawsuit that would make it all feel fair. But every time I picked up the pen, I saw his handwriting in those letters, and I knew what he left behind wasn't measured in dollars. It was in the way I stood when I spoke, the way I never turned my back on a mission, the way I showed up when no one else did. My father didn't just raise a soldier, he raised a man who knew how to walk away when the world handed him a bitter deal and still carry his own name with pride. I kept the watch. That old thing barely ticked anymore. But when I slipped it on my wrist, it felt like armor. My father wore it in the jungle, in deserts, across oceans. And now, it was mine. Not for timekeeping, but for remembering. Not what I lost, what I came from. I called Roland a week later. Told him I wasn't angry anymore. Told him he didn't have to explain anything. I meant it. He was as much a victim of this secret as I was. He didn't steal anything. He was just given something none of us asked for, he cried. I didn't. I started running again. I re-enlisted. Found myself volunteering for the kinds of missions most guys tried to avoid. Not because I was trying to prove anything, but because that's where I belonged. In movement, in service, in places where clarity came in short bursts of adrenaline and silence. Some people define legacy by bloodlines, others by bank accounts. My father tried to do both and failed at each in some way. But I forgave him, not because he earned it, because I needed to. Anger weighs more than a rifle when you carry it long enough. I look at the world differently now. I don't trust names carved into stone or papers filed in court. I trust how a person shows up when it's hard. How do they treat people who can't give them anything in return? That's how I measure a man. That's how I measure myself. The watch still sits on my nightstand. I don't wear it every day, just on the mornings I feel lost, like maybe I'm slipping too far from who I was taught to be. I strap it on like a reminder. That legacy isn't what's left behind. It's what you choose to carry forward. And I carry it, every single day. So now I've told you everything. The truth behind the medals, the silence behind the smiles, and the man behind the uniform. A man who once thought family was written in blood but learned it's written in choices. If you were in my boots, what would you have done? If the person you called your brother turned out not to be, and he inherited everything your father owned, would you fight for what should have been yours? Or would you walk away with nothing but your name, your honor, and a lifetime of memories that suddenly felt different? Would you hold on to the legacy or the lesson? Would you keep the money or keep the peace? That line is thinner than it looks when it's your life sitting on it. I chose the harder road. Not because I'm noble, not because I'm right, but because sometimes the things we let go of say more about us than the things we keep. But I'm curious. If you were me, would you have made the same call? Would you have given up millions to protect a bond that might have never been real? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear what you think.